Welcome back. Hasn't the insights that you've been gaining over the past few clips, hasn't it been amazing? Do you realize that probably over 95% of the people around the world are clueless about some of the insights that you've gained over the past few days? But can you imagine the difference it could make if Christians around the world know these insights? We gotta let them know. And I'm so excited to have you here to be able to help you understand more of the insights. Today, we're going to be talking about Revelation chapters 18 more in depth, and we're also going to be touching on some other chapters relating to the destruction of the evil monetary system. Let's go ahead and switch over to the chart right here. So great insight that we've been gaining over the past few days. John saw a succession of 8 kings. Daniel saw same succession of 8 kings leading up to the return of Christ in power and glory. We now know that Kamini is absolutely positively the 4th king. Well, that's my opinion. Now, in the prophetic playbook story, we look at, we've been touching on the list, numbers 1 through 14. And so you should have those marked. Again, all I want you to do is use a pencil, and beside each one of the numbers there, just mark Y for yes, or N for no, or probably not, or probably so, or I don't know. Just mark something like that beside each one of them as to how you feel about it. And then as we go through the book, you might come back and visit these lists, and you might change your mind. You might go from probably not to probably so, something like that. But anyways, so we touched on 1 through 14. Today, I could stretch it and say, well, we're going to be talking about like 42 to 46, but we're really going to be touching on this more fully, later on. These are covered out in pages like 167 to like 185, something like that. So today, let's go ahead and get started with Revelation chapter 18, and then I'm going to show you a clip, and then after that clip, we're going to talk more about it. So let's go ahead and get started. This is Revelation chapter 18, and it's a continuation of Revelation chapter 17. In this chapter, we get more detail about the destruction of the city that reigns over the kings of the earth. Now, before we get started, I want to remind you of Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23, in which we read, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law." This is so important because what we're looking for is truth. And so keep a prayer in your heart. Feel for the fruit of the Spirit to testify of truth as truth is being taught. This is an important chapter for us to be able to learn about why the city is destroyed, how it's destroyed, and what are the consequences of those who are alive and had been participating in the single monetary system, and also what are going to be the rewards and some of the benefits to those who had not accepted the mark of the beast system. Great chapter. Let's start with verse 1 of chapter 18 in Revelation. "And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the inhabitants of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird." So right there, we get the understanding that this city is evil, and when that city is destroyed, It is the inhabitants of evil. It is evil. Now, look at the next verse, verse 3. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. So what we learn is that there's going to be a period of time in which this city, which reigns over the kings of the earth, that the economic times are going to be phenomenal, very, very successful. And you can see that, some people might be tempted to go over and join this monetary system because look how great it is. Look how everybody is becoming so rich. But look at what happens, though. In verse 4 we read, And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. So don't want to be part of her sins, and you don't want to be part of her plagues. Well, what's the plagues going to be, and what's going on here? Verse 5, let's read it. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her, double according to her works, in the cup which she hath filled, fill her to her double. How much she hath glorified herself, and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, I am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death, and mourning, and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. And the kings of the earth, who have committed fornication, and lived deliciously with her, shall bewail her, and lament for her, when they shall see the smoke of her burning. I want you to remember that. The kings are going to bewail her and lament for her. That's key as we go along. In verse 10 we read, Standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, 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 that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour thy judgment is come. Wow. So the kings of the earth are going to be very disappointed when this city is destroyed. Let's read verse 11, see what happens with the merchants. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more. Now, do you get to see the gravity of the situation here for those who had been participating in this single monetary system? The kings are just really upset. The merchants are weeping and mourning over her as well, because when that city is destroyed, then no one buys the merchandise. When no one buys the merchandise, then what about the tax revenue? Okay, and so you can see that when the buying and selling stops, then we have a catastrophic event going on here. Read the next few verses are verses in which John is trying to help us to understand how significant this event is. That when we're not talking one or two merchants, we're talking everything. Nothing is able to be bought or sold anymore. Look at what John says in the next few verses. Verse 12, And the merchandise of gold, and of silver, and precious stones, and of pearls, and of fine linen, and purple, and silk, and scarlet, and all fine wood, and all manner of vessels of ivory, and all manner vessels of most precious wood, and of brass, and iron, and marble, and cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, and wine, and oil, and fine flour, and wheat, and beasts, and sheep, and horses, and chariots, and the slaves, and souls of men. And the fruits that thy soul lust after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. And the merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city, that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught, and every shipmaster, and all the company in ships, and sailors, And as many as trade by sea stood afar off, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? And they cast the dust off their heads, and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness, for in 1 hour she is made desolate. And now we understand that we're not looking for 7 mountains where there's a city and is far away from any water. No, this city is pretty much kind of like surrounded by water. The water connects people, nations, multitudes, and tongues. And what we find out is that these people, multitudes, nations, and tongues, what are they going to be doing? They're going to be weeping and wailing because of the loss of this city, aren't they? We find that the kings are going to be weeping and wailing, that the sailors and the company on the ships are going to be weeping and wailing, the merchants are going to be weeping and wailing. Everyone who had their allegiance to this evil monetary system, they're going to be weeping and wailing. But the thing is I want you to understand also, is that there's going to be Christians, many Christians, that are going to be part of this monetary system, as well as many Muslims. There's going to be kings around all the world of all their different nationalities are going to be part of this system. Many people who are Christians are going to be part of this system. It's going to be one of those things where you know what, everybody else is doing it, and it's so great. Look how much money we're making out of all this. This is a great thing. Look how much we're going to be able to help other people. And by the way, this system probably is set up under the disguise that it's going to bring peace to the world. And it's unfortunate, but there's going to be these radical Christians that believe that they shouldn't be part of this, and we're going to have to apply the law to them because they're not being compliant. And so, yeah, we'll probably have to kill some of these radical Christians. But look at all the Christians that are part of this system, that are enjoying this, that are becoming rich and helping to spread peace throughout all the world. Yeah, that's what I get the vision of as far as what we're looking at here. But we're going to find out more about this as we go along. But let's go ahead and continue. So now let's look at Revelation chapter 15, verse 1. We're going to make some connections here. In verse 1, we read, And I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled with the wrath of God. So these 7 angels have 7 vials, and in the vials is filled up with a plague of God. And so you have these 7 last plagues. And what we want to look for is, when are the plagues going to start to be poured out upon the world? Look at we're going to go to Revelation chapter 16, and we're going to take a look at the first 2 verses over there. In verse 1, we read, And I heard a great voice out of the temple saying to the 7 angels, Go your ways, and pour out the vials of the wrath of God upon the earth. And the first went and poured out his vial upon the earth, and there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them that worshipped his image. So let's make the connection. When the city is destroyed, then what are the kings doing? They're weeping and wailing. What are the merchants doing? They're weeping and wailing. What are the company doing in the ships? They're weeping and wailing because no one can buy or sell anymore. And that is the first vile plague right there. That is it. The first of the 7 last plagues is the sorrow people will have for having received the mark of the beast and their allegiance to that monetary system, and then suffering the consequences when the city is destroyed and no one is able to buy or sell because the monetary system is gone. It's a nice connection there. Now let's continue on with Revelation chapter 18, verse 20, and read about the celebrations in heaven over the destruction of the city that reigns over the kings of the earth. In verse 20 we read, "Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her." And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and cast it into the sea, saying, "Thus with violence shall the great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the voice of the harpers, and the musicians, and the pipers, and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee. And no craftsman, whatsoever craft he be, shall be found any more in thee. And the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. And the light of the candle shall shine no more at all in thee. And the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived." Now the next verse is very interesting and important. It says, this is Revelation chapter 18, verse 24, "And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth." And now look at Revelation chapter 17, verse 6. We read, "And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration." These killings of prophets, saints, and martyrs of Jesus is in the future. In the future, there will be prophets, saints, and martyrs of Jesus. During those horrible times, there will be prophets on the earth. That is great news. Prophets of God are great blessings to those who accept them. These events are in the future. What do we need to do now? We need to do all we can to keep our government away from this evil Christian killing mark of the beast system. What's one of the best ways to do that? Electing really good Christian candidates. And the sooner, the better. Wasn't there a lot of great information in that short little clip? So insightful, so much information. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the chart again. So we covered out Revelation chapter 18. That talks about the destruction of the city. And we also touched upon these plagues that happen over in the with the 7 vials. So we talked about this area over here. Guys, this has really set us up, because what it's done is that we've been able to verify that both John and Daniel saw a succession of 8 kings leading up to the return of Christ in power and glory. We've been able to verify that this 8th king gets the power, seat, and authority of Satan and goes to fight against Christ when Christ comes back. We've been able to verify that this evil monetary system gets destroyed, and the wrath of God upon that city, that monetary system, the people that are utilizing it, it is horrific. We don't want to have any part of it. Now, in the next clip, what we're going to be talking about is Daniel chapter 8. Such a huge, important chapter, because in Daniel chapter 11, we were able to verify that the United States absolutely is referenced regarding this very moment in time. In Daniel chapter 8, we're going to be verifying that it's talking about the United States as well regarding this very moment in time. And it looks like it's talking about President Trump. As we look at what's going on in the news between the United States and Iran, wow, this is really shaping up. But there's another country, as you know, because you've been reading the Prophetic Playbook story, well, there's another country involved. But tomorrow, what we're going to do is we're going to go through Daniel chapter 8, and we want to verify that chapter, and that is referencing these things that we're talking about. In the Prophetic Playbook story, you saw a few verses from Daniel chapter 8. We're going to go through Daniel chapter 8 tomorrow. This is a big, big clip tomorrow, Daniel chapter 8. And then we're going to talk more about it. So look forward to seeing you with the next video.